everybody. Welcome back. Let's jump into chapter 15. Okay, Genesis chapter 15. Abram promised a son. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." Abram said, "O Lord God, what will you give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "Since you have given no offspring to me, one born in my house is my heir." Then behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "This man will not be your heir, but one who will come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir." And he took him outside and said, "Now look toward the heavens and count the stars, if you are able to count them." And he said to him, "So shall your descendants be." Then he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. And he said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess it." He said to the Lord, "How may I know that I will possess it?" So he said to him, "Bring to me a 3-year-old heifer and a 3-year-old female goat and a 3-year-old ram and a turtle dove and a young pigeon." Then he brought all these things to him, and then cut them in two and laid each half opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds. The birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. God said to Abram, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in the land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I will also judge the nation whom they will serve, and afterwards they will come out with many possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you will be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete." It came about when the sun had set that it was very dark, and behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch, which passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, "To your descendants I have given this land, for the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. The Canaanite, the Kenite, and the Kenizzite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Rephaim, and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Girgasite, and the Jebusite." So concludes Genesis chapter 15. Okay, let's go inside the text. We got quite a bit that's in this chapter to point out and go through. In the very beginning, God is promising Abram quite a bit, that he's going to receive so much that his descendants are going to be as abundant as the stars in the sky. And so in response to that, Abram points out that I am childless. In response to God's encouragement and admonition, Abram showed what nagged at him. How could God promise of many descendants and of being a great nation come about when he had no children? To that point, Eliezer of Damascus lived in his house, so essentially that was who his descendant was going to be. So that was the decision that Abram had made, that if at this point, if I was to pass, that this is who my inheritance would pass down to. And so God explained to him later on that was not the way things were going to be. To Abram, God's promise had stalled. So adoption of a servant as a male heir, a well-known contemporary Mesopotamian custom, was the best officially recognized arrangement to make it come to pass, humanly speaking. Then we show down in here, we get down to into verse 6. Believed, reckoned as righteousness. This is also Paul, the Apostle Paul quoted these words as an illustration of faith over against works. Abram was justified by his faith. We see this here again. His faith that God would provide was counted as righteousness to him. Because these are the same, these people are just like we are. We're fallible. We're not perfect. And because of his belief in God, because God, cannot stand sin, and because of his purity, sin can't be near him, this was counted righteous to him as righteousness. Which is the big misunderstanding, a misunderstanding between the Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament, through the New Testament, we have Christ. But in the Old Testament, Christ hadn't been about. So their act of faith or their obedience was counted to them as righteousness. So it mentions that God put him to sleep, asked him to bring some animals to him, and he cut them in two. This is essentially, this is a ritual that we have, cut them in two. The sign of ancient covenants often involved the cutting in half of animals so that the pledging of parties could walk between them, affirming that this same would happen to them if they had broke their covenant. Okay, God put him to sleep because of the covenant, did not involve any promise on his part. So here again, we see an illustration of how we have nothing to do with our salvation. We have nothing to do with God's instruction. This is God commanded it so, and because we would play no part in it, that's where he had put him to sleep. He would not walk through these pieces as any kind of pledge. The words of God in the covenant ceremony assured Abram that his descendants would definitely be in the land, although a painful detour into Egypt would delay fulfillment until long after his demise. So the Lord told Abram, this is going to happen, but before then, 400 years will pass. So these burdens this information of how Abram could see that as a burden to a certain extent, that the final result of this was not going to be, his people was not going to entirely come into the land until 400 years from now. So he spoke of a future, there was going to be great changes to the land and everything that they were in now. So speaking to the future and speaking to him, because Abram's still trying to understand, how am I supposed to have kids? How am I supposed to have, my wife Sarah's barren. This was all strange to him. But he trusted God. And also on here, we go down to, he made reference to the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. A delay in judgment occasioned the delay in covenant fulfillment. Judgment on Egypt in 14 would mark the departure of Abram's descendants from their land. Judgment on the Canaanites, broadly defined ethnically as Amorites, would mark their entrance into the land. The smoking oven and flaming torch, that would symbolize the presence of God, who solemnly promised by the divine oath to fulfill his promises to Abram by alone passing through the animal pieces. So that's where this was symbolic of God passing through, because this was not going to be anything Abram had to do. So we see all of this, and it shows how he's made that promise to Abram, and from this point forward, we're going to see the fulfillment of that promise. That concludes Genesis chapter 15. I hope you'll join me back here for Genesis chapter 16. And if you're just now seeing this for the very first time, welcome. I appreciate you stopping on this channel, following us. Hit the subscribe button and the like button. That way you can follow us every day. I didn't set out to do this for the analytics and the numbers and everything, but in doing that, we promote content like this on YouTube. There's a lot of content that comes from a lot of different things in this world, and to promote this kind of content out into the world, I think that's what we need to fill the internet with. So thank you for coming, for joining us. That concludes Genesis chapter 15, and I look forward to seeing you back in chapter 16.